Victoria 3 Capacities. What are capacities? Capacities are resources that have constant generation and constant usage. So they are not pooled resources, not like mana. They are rather giving you bonuses or also negatives depending on how much you generate from them and how much you use. You will get positive effects if the resource that you can provide exceeds the usage. If you can have negative effects if the usage of the resource exceeds the effects. There are 4 currencies or capacities in the game. So there's bureaucracy, there is authority, there's influence, and there's money. This is about everything except money. So it's about bureaucracy, it's about authority, and it's about influence. These 4 currencies or capacities are not chosen by random. These are the things that had the greatest influence on the times of the Victorian age. Bureaucracy was needed to span the globe with interconnected webs, and it was needed to create a planning that one could rely on. Authority reflects the interesting political changes in that era. The balance between monarchies, dictatorial states, and the rise of democracies and republics that are balancing it out. Influence represents the ability of your country to act for, against, or with foreign countries. How you choose your allies and what treaties in all aspects of the game you will have with them is determined by influence. The bigger your power, the more influence you have, and the greater effects and the faster effects you will have if you use your influence right. Let's go into the details. Bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is produced by the government administration building in Victoria 3 that produces bureaucracy using bureaucrats in administrator jobs. Who is using bureaucracy? All of the nation's incorporated states use a base amount of bureaucracy. This base amount increases with population size, also with additional institutions like police or education that will cost more bureaucracies. So bigger countries and more developed countries will have a bigger bureaucracy need. What could bureaucracy be characterized by in these times? The legendary sociologist Max Weber characterized it as such that it needed a hierarchical organization, formal lines of organization, and a chain of command, and especially fixed area of activity, a clear purpose, a rigid division of labor, regular and continuous execution of the assigned tasks for that special bureaucracy. And all decisions and powers were restricted by clear regulations from the state, from the government. The officials at that time were increasingly sought after. They needed expert training in their fields to make the state go well. For example, if you were an administrator for mining, then you needed the highest mining engineer education to reach some good post in that field. Career advancement was at that time to a great part dependent on technical qualifications. And these qualifications were evaluated by the organizational rules, the rules of the bureaucracy, and not individuals, because it was determined at that time that that would help the organization, in that case the state, most. A critique of that is that there began the de-individualization of men in bureaucracy. So men were treated as numbers, not as persons anymore. On the other hand, it was also regarded as progress for equality, as the qualifications of someone often overruled how they were born or what people they knew. You had to have clear expert training for your field to get some special posts in the new formal bureaucracy. The next capacity is called authority. It's about the head of state's personal power. I mean, it's very different. I mean, it's about what the president can do, what a leader of a communist country can do, and most commonly, what the monarch of a state can do. How is that generated? It's generated from laws. The more repressive and authoritarian the laws are, the higher will be your authority produced. What is it used by? It's used by decrees and interacting with interest groups and banning certain groups of goods, for example. So to influence the policies of your state directly, you need authority. It's also symbolizing a shift between the powers. So the more power you have through authority, the less power you get from pops. On the other hand, the more influence or power you have from pops, the less you get from authority. So it's a matter of deciding which way to go. And that was also the hot topic at the time for political and philosophical discussions. As many monarchies were transformed into parliamentary monarchies, many monarchies even broke down and were transformed into other states, like with dictatorships, with communism. Most importantly, though, with republics or democracies. That balance between authority, power of the people, and power of the state was, though, hard to achieve. The authority was understood as the ability to exercise power over people, which is difficult to do when the people should be the ones ruling. For example, Hegelianism, on the other hand, understood the ideal state as one where everyone could choose a place in the society depending on their ability, supporting the state patriotically, and so become one with the state's decision. But that was only done if you have enough freedom in the state. And this freedom was a utopian freedom. Often you had the opposite. The opposite led to a lot of problems for the old monarchies, as people wanted more freedom. And if they didn't get more freedom, that was often the reason for democratic and republican movements. Monarchies that adapted and gave more freedom to the people, more power to do something, would strive better, whereas the others would confront revolutionaries, would confront a sudden loss of power, where the other loss of power was negotiated and good for both sides. Something that England and Great Britain did very well after some rumbling in between. And which were the people that got more power? It was mainly the rising, you could call that middle class, but in reality it was mostly rich entrepreneurs through the colonies, through all kinds of enterprises. People became rich, materially well off, and compared to that, the old nobility often lost in wealth compared to the new powers, or were even poor sometimes because they didn't see it as necessary still to work for their money. And because of that loss of economic power, there was also a shift in political power. So the third capacity is called influence. Influence represents the country's ability to conduct diplomacy, especially on the global stage, as globalism was the main influence of the Victorian age. Everything was connected. States were connected to their colonies, and big corporations had paved the way for that. For example, the Indian trade corporations. Nearly every country had some of these. They really opened up and created a web of trade that spanned the globe. They were part of the influence that a country exerted over the globe and over the colonies. Now, where is influence generated from in the game? It's generated from the rank. So great powers will have more influence than major powers, will have more influence than middle powers. You get the point. So if you're only a tiny spot on the map with you will have no influence. And you will have a big disadvantage when exerting influence. You would need bigger partners, one bigger partner, to pave the way for you. You should profit from their policies and sail the same path. Why do I say sail? Because a lot was connected through ships, through sail routes, and through the new steam engine ships too. It is used by and for supporting diplomatic actions and pacts, for example, improving relations, very importantly trade deals, but also traditionally alliances, subjects, etc. The diplomatic relations between states that include trade. What is the purpose of that limitation through influence? It is to choose your friends wisely. You have to make a choice. You cannot be the friend of the whole world, even as a great power. And as a small power, you have to be very careful who should be your friend, and it should be mutual. So, historically, also because of the technological progress, the types of diplomacy were also widely expanded. Economic diplomacy was the strongest and even more on the rise through the colonial connections, while the so-called royal diplomacy was slowly declining as the monarchs and nobles lost power. The corporations and the rather free states gained power. New types of diplomacy that came up included, for example, science diplomacy, where states would work at research projects together, especially in the late time span of Victoria, when communist states popped up. They worked closely together. Then, transcending nationhood through these projects were a lot of countries that were close together. I mean, Great Britain, in a way, also worked together that way. And is maybe one of the best examples for something that worked. Now, it was held together by power mostly, not by people that wanted to come together, but in the end, many profited from that connection at first. Of course, they also paid a price, that's clear. And that price was the so-called debt trap diplomacy. That was a policy of economic control, where you would give money to your former or actual colonies to indebt them to you through now trade and financial and banking treaties to control that country financially. Many of these connections are still active today. A lot of the very, very small or the very poor developing countries are still paying off debts from these very, very old treaties. So there's still a lot of control being exerted over other states in that way of the debt trap diplomacy. The last new and interesting development in diplomacy was the tactical counterinsurgence diplomacy. Secret services, also connected with the trade companies, came up and made it possible for the big players in the game to influence their colonies, former colonies, especially weaker states, in a hidden and sometimes even conspiracy-like way. This led to all kinds of interesting and also terrible developments in diplomacy, where wars were often fought in other countries that were representing their masters together. These kinds of intricacies are what I hope for in Victoria 3. These kinds of connections, this kind of global thinking is hopefully what we will be able to experience. I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to future dev diaries that I will also cover. Thank you for watching and happy gaming to you. This is Immanuel Can, signing out. See you soon and happy gaming. What did you like most about the capacities today? Have a great time until next time and happy gaming. See you soon.